Hi, I'm Andrew Mayne, and I'm here to talk about my new book, Illusion XX, which combines all the illusion plans and books I've written over the years. I also want to talk about why I love illusions and answer some of the questions I've been asked about stage magic and illusion craft. What is an illusion? If you look that up in a dictionary, you're going to get a description involving deception, which is kind of vague and applies to just about every kind of magic. Within theatrical magic, an illusion tends to be a large-scale magic effect, something involving a person or an object that's perhaps bigger than would fit into your hands. Now, this is a blurry definition, but as a rule, it just means something that's rather big and can be performed on a stage in front of hundreds or even thousands of people. Some examples of illusions from magic would be sawing a woman in half, or vanishing an elephant, or a levitation. Why do I love illusions? Well, when I was about 12 years old, I decided that I was going to become an illusionist, a magician that performs illusions. Why did this happen? Well, the reason is kind of simple. I always like to be creative. I love to take things apart. I love to build things. I would take cardboard boxes and try to make them into my own TARDIS from Doctor Who. I was trying to come up with new inventions every day. And when I went to go see David Copperfield, who was probably the first magician I ever saw perform, it blew my mind. It made me realize that magic was so much more bigger than I thought. And not only was it about performing small-scale magic, but these big effects that could be invented and created. And as somebody who loves to create, that was too much to resist. So forget about becoming a scientist or an inventor. I was going to become an illusionist. When I was a kid learning about magic and illusion, my two heroes as far as magic creators were Jim Steinmeier and Paul Osborne. I loved reading Paul Osborne's illusion plans when they were included in Genie magazine, and I enjoyed his books because they taught me a lot about how to build them. So imagine how excited I was when Paul Osborne offered to publish a couple of my ideas in one of his books. That was kind of like the high point for me as a magic creator. Later on, my buddy Rand Woodbury published some of my ideas, and I started to build a reputation as a magic creator. When I decided to put out my first book, Solo X, I decided that I was going to try to fit it into a particular theme. Solo X was illusions for the solo performer. I had just finished traveling around the world with a show that involved dancers and helpers, and I was trying to figure out a way to streamline that, because sometimes you would show up in a place and you couldn't bring your dancers, you didn't have all the resources you wanted, so I wanted to come up with a way to saw myself in half or crawl through a compact disc. And Solo X was the first book of all my own stuff that I put out there, and stuff from there is still performed to this day. My walking through a mirror effect, my crawling through a compact disc, that all started in this one book. And the funny thing is, the book, I love the ideas, but the illustrations are, well, kind of sketchy at best. I've never been much of an illustrator. I've been more of somebody who has ideas and I just physically build stuff. So trying to communicate these ideas at first was especially challenging. I actually did the drawings in Microsoft Paint. But thankfully, magicians saw past that and saw the ideas and decided to build them for themselves and perform them, and haven't stopped doing so since then. When I discovered that I loved illusions, I was very fortunate because my father was a pretty good carpenter. And on the weekends, we would go out into the garage and we would build something from a Paul Osborne plan. So this allowed me to put together an illusion act while I was still a teenager without having a lot of money, just using a lot of time and my father's patience, which I tested quite a lot. When I started writing books on illusions, I realized that not everybody's fortunate to have a father who's eager to help them out and start building these things. And sometimes we're in situations, we're performing somewhere else where we don't have access to tools, or maybe we're in other countries and trying to get big things done is just prohibitive because the resources aren't there. So for the follow-up to Solo X, I wrote a book called Illusion Effects. And the whole goal behind illusion effects was to try to come up with magic effects that could be built using very, very simple tools. Basically stuff that could almost be made on your kitchen table. Using like a jigsaw and a few other tools that could be bought inexpensively and that you should probably have if you want to just do any kind of repairs around the house. It didn't require bigger tools, skill saws, things like that. Most of the stuff you could have pre-cut at a hardware store. take it home and put it together. That book was very popular because there were a lot of people that didn't have access, didn't have time, didn't have the money, whatever, to build big illusions, but were looking for projects they could do on their own. Or in some cases, magicians who were in the middle of gigs in far off places were working out of their hotel rooms trying to come up with new material. So illusion effects was pretty popular from that. And I included things in there like even how to make a motorcycle appear using just not a lot of parts or tools or equipment, and other effects that had a very, very big impact but didn't cost tens of thousands of dollars. Along with creating large-scale stage magic, I started creating fast-paced, quick illusions that you could throw into the middle of a show and just stun your audience and move on to something else. One of the first ones I came up with was the pocket sawing in half, which was a way to make it look like you sawed yourself in half. It was a pretty easy thing to make. Took a little bit of practice to get it to work, but a lot of magicians had fun with it, using it as just this quick shock magic type illusion. Bisection was my take on P.T. Selbit's Girl Without a Middle effect, or the disembodied princess, probably made the most famous by Howard Thurston in his illusion show. I love the idea of just part of your body vanishing while the rest of it's still there. So I came up with a very fast-paced version of this that was extremely portable and put the plans together in the Bisection booklet, which is included in Illusion XX. Since I published that effect, it's been performed by numerous magicians, and probably my favorite performance was watching Cyril Takayama do it on one of his TV specials to a great reaction. Probably the oldest description we have of a magic show comes from the West Car Papyrus, which described the feats of the ancient Egyptian Dede as he performed for the pharaoh Khufu. Now, this is probably a fictionalized account, but I suspect based on perhaps real magic performed during that period. And one of the centerpiece effects that Dede would do was the decapitation of animals and people. Decapitation of a person, as gruesome as it is, has actually been a pretty common theme in magic. If you look at Reginald Scott's Discovery of Witchcraft, written thousands of years later, that was one of the illusions that he exposed. For one of my effects, Facelifter, I thought that would be kind of a cool premise, the separation of your head, and I came up with a very simple way and a simple prop in which you could make it look like your head was severed from your neck, twist it, turn it, spin it all around, raise it up, and then put it back in place. And this became a pretty popular effect because it fits all inside of a cardboard box, not that much bigger than your head. I went through a period where I started creating a lot of very visual shock magic effects, even putting out a book called Shock Magic and a video called Shock Effects. One of the illusions that came from that period was Arm Buster. I've always loved the premise of the candle through arm effect, and I wanted to come up with a more horrifying version. In this effect, you take a drill with a very wicked drill bit and drive it through what's supposed to be a magic cast on your arm and create havoc. And if you want to, you can even have blood spew out. It's a very, very visual effect, maybe not for everybody, but you can modify it as you like. And this was sort of a fun take on a classical effect that I thought could be made a bit more disturbing. In studying illusions, I realized that some of the most powerful effects in magic didn't rely upon large props. Instead, they were dependent upon clever misdirection and choreography. So in my book, The Secret Illusion Show, I decided to take this to its extreme and created a book of magic illusions that could all fit down inside of a briefcase. Now, this required working with assistants that knew what they were doing. In most cases, a proper stage setting. But the effects in here allow you to do everything from appear, walk through a person, vanish, and even teleport. As a performer, always looking for new angles and new presentations, one of the things I love to do is to just pick one of my magic books off a shelf and randomly flip through it. I love doing this with illusions, but there aren't a lot of books on illusions. So I decided I would take 100 of my favorite ideas that I'd come up with over the years. They didn't fit any particular theme, but were just different twists or some effects that I'd performed but never had the chance to publish, and put them all together in one big book. And that's what Illusion Book is. It's 100 ideas ranging from just new interpretations of old effects to really bizarre out there ideas like how to vanish a crushed car or make an elephant disappear even if you don't own an elephant. And it also includes some of the first magic effects I ever performed, some of the stage magic I did, like my death box and my shadow box. My goal that was just a book you could pick up, flip to any page, maybe find exactly what you're looking for, or get you started thinking on your own inspiration. After I started publishing books and plans on illusions, I began to get questions from people asking about techniques, methods, and principles, and I realized that a lot of what we know in magic is sort of acquired knowledge through trial and error, and not all of it's been collected. So I decided to put together a book that took what I'd learned over the years and some of my thoughts and theories on illusion and make it accessible to everybody else, along with presenting some new ideas. And this was Illusion Tech, which I like to think is sort of a great starting point for somebody who wants to get a better understanding on why some things work and the psychology of magic and deception. Really effective illusions, particularly the kind that have to maybe conceal somebody, don't waste a centimeter of space, which means that when you're publishing illusion plans or just ideas, you can't always include dimensions, because something that's made to conceal me would be very different than a prop designed for perhaps one of my more flexible dancer assistants. So I decided to put out a series of plans where I could be very specific about the dimensions because they were very forgiving about who they could be performed with. And this was my Illusion Impact series. And the first one in there was my effect Voodoo Box, which was a modern take on the sword basket. For this effect, it uses a cardboard box that has some kind of clever, I think, surface details that make it look smaller and more deceptive, along with the substitution of umbrellas for the swords. I found that if you look around a bit, particularly at dollar stores or discount stores, you could find these umbrellas very, very cheap. And they have a very neat deceptive property about them. Even though an umbrella has a very thin shaft, they take up a lot of space. And if you're trying to do a penetration effect, this is very helpful. The second illusion that I put out in the Illusion Impact series is Light Storm, which is a penetration effect based upon a classic PT Selbit illusion, but with a little bit of a twist where you shove a light through another human being holding a board. It's flat, requires very few props, but has a very powerful effect and is great to do in a darkened theater. The third illusion in the Illusion Impact series was Spectre Cabinet. This effect came about because I was watching some videotape of a very big presentation I used to do of the Shadow Box and realized that I had a very complicated piece of apparatus to do this that could have been replaced with a very simple principle given the stage settings, which is a very common stage situation for many performers. The result is a version of the Shadow Box illusion that fits down inside of a duffel bag and makes for a really awesome appearance. The fourth illusion in the Illusion Impact series is Razor Wire. I took a method that I used in my first book, Solo X, for walking through a mirror and figured out a way that you could use it with an even more portable prop, which is a frame with some razor sharp wire that the audience can inspect and make sure is really there and really dangerous. And there's a kind of a cool twist where you can go through it and your shirt ends up pretty ripped up. This effect has proven to be extremely popular because it's very portable, it's very visual, and has an element of danger, but is, totally safe. Pretty much. Now, if you're looking through all of my books and illusions, you might do a double take when you come across Sword Basket, which looks on the surface pretty much like the classic Sword Basket illusion, one of the oldest illusions in all of magic. The reason I did a version of this was that as I started playing with different kinds of materials, I discovered that I could make a version of this effect that was extremely lightweight and folded down totally flat. The result is my plans for the sword basket, which uses a special kind of plastic material called corrugated plastic that you can cut with scissors. It uses Velcro and just a few other materials that you can get at your hardware store to perform a very big illusion that literally folds flat, and you could put it between your mattresses and forget it was even there. I've always loved levitations. I think they're one of the purest forms of illusion. That's because to the audience, there doesn't appear to be any apparatus. Over the years in my own shows, I've almost always included some form of levitation, and I've been creating and playing with methods. In this book, How to Levitate, I put together a number of my favorite methods, ranging from very simple ones that are totally impromptu to more involved stage methods of levitation, and also show you how you can create this illusion without really complicated apparatus. You'll see some of my favorite effects in there, including probably my personal favorite, my own little invention, broom flight, which is how to levitate on a broom. I asked everybody on my email list if they had any questions about illusions, and the response was great. So I'm going to do my best to answer some of them here for you right now. Ray Shu writes, "Hi Andrew, can you talk about creativity? How you come up with illusions? Where do you get your inspirations? Some people start with the props and secrets, then they try to come up with a trick for it. Some people start with an idea, then they try to find the props and secrets to bring their idea alive. What's your take? Have you ever gotten stuck coming up with a new idea? What do you do?" The answer to that question, Ray, for me is I do all of the above. Sometimes I see an optical effect, a psychological trick, just some method that I know could be really useful and very powerful in the right context, and I put it in a notebook or just file it away for later on. Other times, I think of something that would be really cool to see and try to figure out how to make that happen. That's the case of, for instance, my trick Bisection, where I loved the idea of the disembodied princess, and I wanted to create a way to perform this effect without a lot of apparatus. Now, when I first had the inspiration to do this trick, I didn't have a method. The method found me as I sat down with pen and paper and went through all the different ways I could try to create this illusion. And the result, if you're familiar with the effect, is kind of an unconventional method, but works really well for what I was trying to accomplish there. I've had other methods come to me from playing around with props and objects. I know that was the case of Shrinker. That's been the case of some other effects where I've just had things and started playing with them and seeing what I could do and what it looked like. So my suggestion is keep track of all the different methods you see, keep track of all the ideas that you want to perform, but maybe you don't know how to do it, and then just play with things. Sometimes picking up objects, playing with different materials will lead to new discoveries and even new effects. And then, hopefully, you find the right context in which to perform it and will have a powerful piece of magic. Michael Corley would like me to share my thoughts on performing solo illusions. Michael, I'd say the first piece of advice I would give you is true of any illusion is that you want to make sure that you have the right venue and control over your surroundings. And that's more than just the right lighting or the right angles. It means that you want to know that you have a good offstage space, that you'll have the time to get in and out of a prop, that you're not going to be wasting a lot of the audience's attention trying to move things back and forth. The second piece of advice I would tell you is you need to be very conscious of how long it takes you to set up an effect or just get into a prop, perform it, and then get out of it. The difference between an amateur and a professional is that an amateur just focuses on one moment. The professional worries about every other detail of that. And you can tell when something's new for somebody because maybe the effect works, but it takes them forever to get everything right, to position it, etc., to figure out how to put the swords in or make their head disappear, whatever it is, because they didn't spend the time worrying about everything else. A really smooth, fluid show or effect is exactly that. It's smooth and it's fluid. Don't just focus on the effect, think about all the other details around it. The next time you watch a performer like David Copperfield, you'll notice that he has dozens of stagehands quickly moving props on and off the stage, or even present during the illusion to hand him sword blades or hand him whatever props he needs and to get them out of the way so we can move quickly through the show and not waste our attention span on details that aren't important. So think about that. Really, really strong solo performers move very quickly and very fluidly. The last thing I would tell you is videotape yourself from multiple angles. Don't just watch yourself from straight on. See how the trick looks when the camera's over there. See how the trick looks when the camera's over there. I have people send me videos of them performing magic effects and they don't even look right straight on. I can only imagine what it looks like from a different point of view. But performed right and with enough practice and energy and passion, you can create miracles and impress everyone. Tiffany writes, since you revealed pretty much all of your illusions, do you plan on developing more in case you would like to perform in the future? Tiffany, I have a lot of ideas for magic. It's something I think about all the time. It's probably why I have no social life. So trust me, even though Illusion XX is the combination of all the books and plans I've published over the years, it's not all of my ideas. It's just the stuff that I presented to magic audiences. And there's a lot more to come, both in my own shows, my own presentations, and also things that I'm excited to share with other magicians because I think it can really help and have a big impact there. So don't worry, there's more to come. Michael Sheehan wrote to me wanting to know if I could share some more of my thoughts on creating new illusions. Michael, I'd say that one of the things you can do if you want to create new ideas for magic is think outside of magic. One of the problems I think many aspiring magic creators have is they just refine things that are already there instead of looking elsewhere for inspiration. Now, this could be as simple as watching a movie, watching movies where science fiction or fantasy is an important part. See what a very creative person who's not confined by methods will come up with. This could be looking at very interesting art pieces or other examples of very cool things that are very visual and thinking how you can apply that to magic. Another approach is to just think about it from a story point of view. Think about conflict and resolution. What would be a difficult challenge? What would be a very interesting resolution to it? Too often in magic, we just do something because it looks pretty and cool, not because it has any meaning beyond that. My final suggestion is what I've said before. Keep a notebook. Have ideas. They don't have to be fully formed ideas. I think sometimes we get obsessed with the idea of we see these notebooks and movies, there's fully formed ideas and plans and illustrations and stuff. My notebooks are messy. They're just a couple sentences. Sometimes they're just these little sketches, these tiny little things, which would be just a fragment that I then build upon into something else. Get in the habit of keeping these ideas together in one place or multiple places. I have dozens of notebooks all around me, ranging from magic ideas to story ideas for novels. Keep having ideas, keep asking questions, play with things. Go to a toy store, pick up objects, go to a craft or a hobby store, look at the different materials there, ask yourself questions, go to a garage sale, pick up some old item and ask yourself, what does this mean? Now you can use the classical forms of creativity too, like if I make this bigger, if I make this smaller, but that will often lead to things that are just very similar to what came before. But if you're asking very different questions, artistic and creative questions about story and meaning, you might be very surprised by the answers you find. Raul from Mexico also asked about creativity and wanted to know more about my process. And I don't have any one specific process. I'm open to several or whatever techniques that work. He wanted to know about Edward de Bono, who wrote the 6 Thinking Hats, which is certainly another approach towards creativity. And I think reading anything you can on creativity can be beneficial. Creativity in its simplest explanation is problem solving. Sometimes you don't know what the problem is you're trying to solve is, but you're trying to create something. The problem is there's an empty spot here and you want to put something there, which can help you start off on your own path. You have to ask yourself what you're trying to do. If you're simply saying to yourself, I want to have neat ideas, maybe you need to drill down a little bit more. I ask myself what problem I'm trying to solve creatively. Maybe in my show, do I need a moody piece? Do I need something that's scary? Do I need something that's funny? Do I want something that's big? Do I want something that's small? What do I want to say about myself? Ask questions. What are you trying to do? And that will help you narrow it down. Now, when it comes to the physical dimensions of a prop or something else, that's going to be easier to answer when you know what you're looking for. But to know what you're looking for, you have to ask questions and figuring out what the approach is going to be. Now, one of the things I used when I wrote my magic books was the idea of saying I'm going to solve specific problems. Solo X, illusions for the solo performer. So I knew what would be and what would not be in that book. And then from there, I could take a look at classical forms of magic and figure out how I would approach them if I only had myself to perform them. Or I could come up with methods that made more sense if there was just one person there. In my book, Illusion Effects, that was me trying to create illusions using very simple materials. Again, I could start with classics of magic and then figure out how can I make them easier to make and produce and perform if you didn't have a lot of resources. So ask a bunch of questions. Try to figure out what problem you're trying to solve, and that's going to lead you to more specific answers. Thank you to everybody who sent me questions, and thank you for listening to me talk about illusions. If you would like to hear me talk a little bit more or ask me questions about creativity, whether it's magic, books, or other creative endeavors, you might want to follow me on Twitter at Andrew Mayne. I do a lot of live streams through Periscope, which is an app you can get on your iPhone or your Android device, where you can ask me questions in real time or watch my videos later on. I'm there quite frequently, and I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, I'm Andrew Mayne.